Welcome back, everyone. And we are going to be speaking with Eli, and we're talking to witches in this series who have been going through transitions and or periods of stagnation. So obviously, Eli, when I'm speaking to witches, we are under the assumption that you identify at this moment as witch, right? Yes. So there may be a little lag for everybody watching, so I just want to make you aware. He's got storms going on over there.
All right.
So let's talk about, Eli, what first drew you to witchcraft? What caught your attention? What sparked you to study or research magic and witchcraft?
Okay, so that's actually a very kind of interesting / boring story. All my life, I grew up always wanting to be a wizard, always wanting to just cast spells because of what you see on TV or read in books and whatnot. And I remember on December 26th, like 7-8 years ago now, I told my mom, hey, you know what? I actually want to do this. My cousin, she's been a Wiccan for all her life, and she's told me like this, that, or the other about it. And I went to my mom and I said, hey, I want to be a witch. I want to explore that side of spirituality. I want to see what it's like, and I want to see if it's for me. And so that kind of just dropped me into this whole pool, or not even a pool, an ocean of just knowledge that I was just given by my cousin, by my family, who I did not even know were witches until I opened my mouth about that.
Wow. So how old were you when this happened?
I was about 13. Yeah, I was 13.
And so are you saying that your mom was also a practicing witch too?
Well, she doesn't want to admit it, but in a way, I feel like she does. But my grandma, she's open about it. My cousins are open about it. Everyone else is just, oh yeah, I'm a witch. My mom, she's just like, I'm spiritual.
Wow. Okay. So, wow, that must have I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, because that must have been crazy. I just can't imagine, like, nobody's talking about being witch or whatever. And then you bring up this curiosity and bam, they're just crawling out of the woodwork.
Yeah. So I grew up Greek Orthodox. My father took me to the church every Sunday, every Wednesday night. And so that was my life for the longest time. And then my father and my mom, they grew apart, as some parents do. And I stayed with my mom, and then just this whole new side of my family came out that I did not know about until I exposed interest. Is that the word? Yeah, interest to it.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So right from you used the word wizard, which caught my attention. So you were interested in being a wizard or a magician or whatever. When did you actually identify with the word witch? When did you say, I'm none of that, witch is what I am?
I would have to say maybe after doing a lot of studying, I kind of just realized, oh, wizard is just a fantasy term, and then witch is just for everybody. And also, I kind of like throwing the word witch out there. It's got some power to it, in my opinion.
I agree.
So it resonated.
Yeah, I agree. There is definitely power in that word. So when you look back at when you were first studying and when you started actively practicing witchcraft, what sort of things did you do? What was, if you, hindsight being 2020, looking back at what you did, how would you categorize the type of witchcraft you were doing?
So, that's interesting, actually. I would say a balance between maybe green magic and traditional North American folk magic. It was some weird balance in between there. And it kind of just gave me a new appreciation for where I'm at and the world around me. So,
So when you use the label or the term green, witchcraft, what are you talking about? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. If you've been watching my
Right.
channel, you know I like definitions. You know, when we're talking
Right.
about this is what it means. So for you, when you use the word green witchcraft, what are you talking about?
Oh, definitely all things nature. There's a forest not too far from here. I try to go into it as often as I can. I pick like random flowers or leaves or whatever, as long as I can identify it, because I'm kind of sort of the person who has to know what I'm doing. Actually, I feel that's valid.
It is.
As long as I know what I'm doing, picking the right flower, doing this or that, I take it from the forest. Well, with, admiration, of course, bring it
Right.
back. And then I look at it and I'm like, hey, you know what? This feels right. This is me. I'm in the forest. I'm working with nature itself, plants, herbs, trees, and the spirits of the forest too. And it all just made sense to me.
Yeah, that does. And that does seem, for me, when I think of green witchcraft, I think of using herbs and being out in nature and really communing with the spirits of nature and the elements. That I would use the same term when we're talking about green witchcraft. I just wanted to make sure that everybody, even watching this, would be on the same page, that that's sort of the magic you were doing in the beginning. So, can you take us through what a typical sort of day might have been for you in your magical witchcraft back then? Like, what would be more common things, spell work, if that was even part of your witchcraft back then?
Back then, I would say a lot of what I did throughout my typical day was I'd constantly research anything and everything, because I love knowledge, and this whole library is actually a part of my life right now. So yeah, I'd go to school. I was in high school at the time. I'd go to school with 3 or 4 books on herbalism, on spirits of the forest, on this, that, or the other, and just read all of them at the same time. I was a weird kid. I had one book in one hand, another book in another hand, kind of just read them at the same time while doing my schoolwork.
Wow. Wow. So a lot of studying, actual studying. Were you practicing? Right. I mean, I know you were going out into the forest, which is definitely practicing, but were you doing any sort of, meditation, spell crafting, anything?
Yes. Growing up, I did a lot of, tea spells. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. I drank a lot of tea, and I would always remember, hey, I remember this specific tea bag, or the herbs in the bag were for this, then the other. I could enchant it, bless my day with prosperity, right, if I needed it. Love, weird that a 13-year-old kid needed love, but yeah, every now and then,
No, I know. Yeah. There's more than just romantic love too. And
right.
That totally makes sense to me. And that fits really in with what you were doing. I mean, that definitely makes sense to me. So knowing that your family, cousins and grandmother and other people in your family were witches, did you ever have the opportunity to, do a ritual or do a spell with them? Did you ever practice with them?
No. We all kind of are solitary in our own way. Like, we'll chat here and there about certain things we could do on certain days. Like for Yule, we could light a log, or this, for spring, we could dance on a pole, whatever you want to do.
Right.
Other than that, we all kind of just were to ourselves. I was the kind of catalyst in the sense of I wanted to learn more. So I'd always talk to my family, hey, what do you do for this? Or what do you use? So, we're very solitary in all of our practices, but at the same time, if needed, we all came together.
Nice. And that really, I think, is important, because then you had actual people, other than just the books that you were getting information from. You actually had individuals who you were part of your family. So I imagine, I could be wrong, but you didn't have to worry too much about negative judgments from them, that you could actually go to, and if needed, have them actually practically show you things instead of just,
Right.
the disconnected book or videos or websites. You actually had people you could go to. That's interesting. And that's great. So when you, because we're talking about transitions and stagnation, what sort of led up to your period of that trend? And were you going through a transition and stagnation, or just transition, or just stagnation? Talk to us about what sort of brought you to that point.
I would say kind of a mixture of both at different times. So where I'm from, I'm in the Bible Belt area of the South. So there's, a lot of, I got to be a little bit quiet about what I do for not necessarily fear, but definitely for judgment. And so a lot of times, me being the kid I was, going to school with books about witchcraft, like going on school computers, typing how to do this, or what's the spiritual meaning behind this or that. A lot of my teachers and friends or classmates at the time, before I started doing all that, they kind of, they would actually think I was an intelligent man. Not that they didn't think I was still intelligent, but they definitely thought differently of me. And it kind of hit hard when I was going from my high school to my college life. Senior year especially, at that point, I was very kind of self-minded, worrying about what my image was to other people. Because, I was young. I was this kid in high school that, that's typical for a high schooler to, worry about themselves and what they look like to others. And it got to the point where I had to set down something I love. So witchcraft, I had to set that aside, and I had to kind of not necessarily forget about it, but definitely just create a whole different side of me that wasn't me. And it was just very off-putting, at least for me. At one point, I would always go to school with all these different books and learning different things all the time. And now it's like I'm going to school, I'm still learning, but about things that to me just are typical instead of the untypical, which is what I was very interested in. And I had a friend at the time who very Christian, very in his beliefs. He didn't know it at the time, but I was kind of sort of really into him. I wanted to kind of date him and whatnot, but I kept on thinking if I was going to date him, I'd have to not be this. I'd have to be that. And that just set a whole barrier on who I was as a person. And it really kind of actually diminished who I was and took me through a loop.
I bet. I can only imagine. I mean, going from high school to college, graduating high school, that's a big transition. That's like, okay, time for adulting, right? And then if you're going away to college, there's still that feeling of schooling. So you still have some sort of structure, but you still are starting out with freedom as well, because, it's different. Schooling is different. And then added into the idea that there's someone you're interested in who clearly would not embrace the witch that you are. Yeah, that's got to be tough. That must have been a very difficult place to be for you. So how did you work through that? What sort of and actually, before you answer that, how long ago was this transition, this moment for you?
The way I worked through it was, and I'm ashamed to admit it, I kind of didn't. I fell into the whole loop of, you know what, I have to start changing myself. And God, that was actually, now that I think about it, that was something I shouldn't have done. I should have just admitted to myself, hey, I like what I do. I should keep doing it, but I didn't. And what I would do is I look at my altar and I think, this is who I am as a person. This is who I am as me. I am a witchy boy living under a falsehood that shouldn't have to exist. And it wasn't until actually last year that I decided, no, I'm taking back who I am. I'm going to admit to myself that I am a witch, and I have to tell that friend. Well, I don't have to tell him, but I have to, kind of just push him out of my life in a way in order to better myself. Because I knew if I kept him as a friend, or if I just kept him in my life at all, it wouldn't have helped me. It would have only influenced me worse.
Because you were trying to be someone you weren't for him?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I'm going to cry. That's sad. But
yeah, I know.
It's sad, but then I think, how many witches actually end up doing that? I mean, because I guess, like you were saying, at some point you could kind of make it work. It would hobble along, and eventually I think it would catch up with you.
Right.
But you could definitely compartmentalize parts of yourself, but that's going to cause stress in yourself at some point.
Oh, and it did. It did. Yeah, I would remember thinking, like, he would hold a flower, and I'd want to tell him, "Oh, keep that flower on you. That flower is for this," but I couldn't.
Because he'd be like, "How do you know that?"
Exactly.
So it was just a year ago or so you said that you kind of came to the conclusion that you weren't going to do that anymore?
Yeah, after it, like I said, this hit last year when I finally decided to be my full self. I kind of just took, and it was a weird day too. I woke up from my bed, and out of nowhere, I just had this self-realization of, no, I'm me. I have to be me. And I remember going to the college campus, wearing my pentacle, having a little witch hat, because I have the stereotypical witch outfit. And my friend looked at me so weird, and I said, "Hey, it's me. I'm just being more of myself." And from then, yeah, our relationship deferred. He doesn't talk to me as much as we used to, but it's okay.
And then you can't figure out what it is that like inspired you, huh? Because I'm trying to, there must have been something, something that just helped you click to say. Yeah.
I genuinely don't know. I remember the exact day I woke up too. It was weird. I woke up and I felt like bright and refreshed. I looked over, again, it happened with my altar. I looked over at my altar and it was just beaming, like maybe a spirit came and just cleansed it. I don't know. And it was just beaming. And I thought, okay, I can't. I have to. I'll be me.
That's amazing. So okay. So when you started getting back into a practice, or started accepting and, embracing that part of you, what did you do? Like in your practice, how did that look? How did that manifest in your witchcraft?
Definitely. So there's a lot of changes. I'm no longer the typical green witch that I used to be. Now I deal a lot with just a lot with balance, like keeping balance, I guess. There's a lot of balance symbolisms. There's the Egyptian mythology of the scales. There's just a lot of it. And I incorporate Baphomet. That's another one. I incorporate him to an extent in my practice where I just make sure that anything that I'm doing, it has a balance where it's something that I want to do and something that I'm called to do. And it's no longer just me doing it or me hiding it. It's just all lined up and all equaling out with each other.
Right. Do you still do any of the green witchcraft that you used to do? Do you do any of that sort of stuff still?
I still do my P spells because they're very simple and whatnot. In fact, I have a little thing in my cup right now. Other than that, maybe here and there I'll throw some herbs in a bag, make a charm bag, give it to a friend or whoever I'm doing it for. But as far as anything else, it's all balance working. If someone needs help with something, I push. like I enforce the push for them. If they need help with money, I enforce the push to get money, but I also let them know that they have to definitely work for it, because it's only how it's all natural law. It's how it works. The universe, in my opinion, now that I've evolved, balance is everything.
Right. So how would you like categorize your witchcraft now? Like before it was like green, a lot of green witchery. How do you label it?
Not entirely ceremonial magic,
Okay.
but to an extent, there's ceremonial magic, because it reminds me that I am a spiritual being living on this earthly planet, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't know. And it puts me where I am in a mental state while also pushing out what I need in physicality.
Okay. So do you do a lot of rituals then?
Yeah, actually. In fact, I'm getting a lot of my friends who I have now that know I'm a witch now versus when they didn't back then. They're all coming to me and they're all saying, "Hey, I need you to cleanse my apartment, or I need you to do something to make my life a little easier." And at this point, I would say at least once a week or twice a week, I've been definitely working up a storm and getting a little, a little out there.
So then I would assume that your practice is more structured now than it used to be.
Yes, everything is a routine. I have a planner now that, like, on specific days each week, I do a certain like thing for cleansing on Wednesdays, or warding on Mondays, things like that. It's all structured and it's all written out, and it's all day by day.
What do you think inspired the more structured way of your magic this time, during, the new evolution of Eli?
Yeah. Evolution of Eli. That's a weird way to put it. Okay. Structure for me, I would say that I haven't yet figured out a specific structure, because I'm still getting knocked on my feet every now and then. I'll admit that. But it's becoming a lot easier, especially since now I'm also in a better place. Because not only was I going through this whole transition through who I am as a person and not accepting it, I had a little bit of a rough home life. And so now that I moved out and I'm on my own, per se, I'm kind of able to even figure out more about what I need and how to incorporate that into my daily life.
Well, that makes sense to me because I mean, when you're in high school, as much as you're getting to know yourself, you're still not fully liberated from your family, your parents, unless, of course, you ended up moving out before. But I mean, living under someone else's roof, and especially parents or guardians of some sort, it's understood that you're going to follow their rules in their home. There's, rules of the family, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And then when you move out on your own, whether you're at college in a dorm or at college in an apartment, or you've just moved out, now you're free to decide for yourself how you're going to structure your life. And that makes perfect sense to me as to structuring your witchcraft. Now you can, do what you want, unless you have roommates, I guess, right? Then you gotta, make sure you're taking note of, not causing too much stress in your roommate life, because that could be that could be difficult.
No, my roommate, he's pretty great about it. He actually encourages me to do what I do, and that's what I needed. Back when I lived at home, I had that as well, but apparently I didn't have that as much, if I were hiding who I was.
Right. Well, that makes sense too. I mean, especially if you were struggling, trying to find yourself and not making sure you're who other people would want you to be, trying to be authentic with yourself. I mean, yeah, that's just a struggle in its own. I can't imagine extra things, influencing you as an individual. Well, that's good that you now have the opportunity and you have true support, people who really know who you are and are supporting
Right.
you in that way. That's a great thing to have. That's wonderful. So, I mean, a typical day, I mean, I know you talked about having, certain days for certain things. What if we were to just pluck out just one typical day? What does that sort of look like for you now in your witchcraft?
Well, I do start off every morning making myself a cup of tea, blessing it for whatever I feel I need that day. Um, if it's a work day, I'll put together, I actually have it right here, a little grounding bag of rocks to keep me, in my head, because my work likes to pound me out a bit. And then usually by the end of the day, I would always kind of come home, go to my altar, light the incense, light the candle, and just breathe.
Mhm.
Because I feel like my altar, my sacred space, whatever you feel like calling it, I guess. For me, it's home, like a second home. It's a home for my mindset, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Right, right. You mentioned stones. So you work with crystals and stones.
Yes, ma'am. I work. Actually, I didn't start working with crystals as heavily as I do now until I'm gonna say mid-February, because a metaphysical shop recently opened around my area, and the shop owner quickly became a mentor of mine. And so I visit her on a regular basis. She always teaches me new things, like these stones and their properties. She taught me what all they mean, how to like work with them, and so that's something that I'm figuring out now as I go along.
So crystals and stones, I'm assuming when you first started, they weren't a big influence in your craft, and now they seem to be pretty prominent, which I think is a common thing for a lot of individuals, a lot of witches and non-witches too, crystals and stones.
Right.
Are there any other items like that? I mean, do you do divination now? Do you have tools that you use? Did you back then?
Back then, I would say yes and no. When I was first starting off, my grandma gave me my first tarot deck, and I had no idea what I was doing with it. I just knew, oh, if I pull this card, it would tell me something. And so that's kind of what my basis on tarot was for the longest time. And now I do use tarot in my practice on a fairly regular basis, whether to get some clarity on something that's like gnawing at me, or my roommate, actually, he has a couple of his coworkers who were very interested in getting readings, but they didn't know where to go. Directed them towards me, and I was like, okay, this could be a fun learning experience for both of us. First off, I'll learn how to bond with my cards more and what they mean, and then you get a reading out of it.
Nice, nice. So it seems like even the things that may have been like followed you through the transition,
Right.
the common thread, you're learning more, you're getting more in tune with these things, and you're introducing new things too. So I think that's definitely showing an evolution of your witchcraft, or even a transition into a deeper, more meaningful practice, which makes sense, because you're becoming the witch that you are meant to be, at least from my perspective.
Right. Yeah.
So what sort of advice would you give others that might be going through a transition, or a period of stagnation? What advice would you offer them?
I'd probably say go with your gut, whatever feels comfortable to you. If you need to step away from your craft, like I did, make sure that it's something that will actually benefit you. For me, I would say, you know what, now that I think about it, it benefited me in a way of it helped me realize who I truly was.
Right.
But yeah, if you need to step away from your craft, make sure it's something that will actually benefit you. Or if you're going through a hardship in terms of your craft, like how I was being judged or whatnot, really in the end, it's all about how you feel. That's
Right.
what I would say. It's how you would feel if you need to step away, how you'd feel just being more open to it. Listen to your gut, listen to your intuition.
I agree. Definitely listen to your gut and your intuition. And I think sometimes, it's like in your case, when you give up something that you think doesn't mean that much, like, and then it's not there anymore. I think that absence, the missing it, the void, that part of you, when you don't have it, you realize how much it is a part of you. It's sort of like thinking,
Yeah.
oh, it's just something I do. It's not something I am. And then when we realize that we had just thrown it away, we recognize the missing. I think sometimes that's important for people when we're going through transitions, especially witches. There's a lot of talk about aesthetics, the aesthetic, or the witches who are just doing it for the aesthetic. And I think if anybody watching this feels that, well, I like the aesthetic of it, and then you start questioning, am I only in it for it? If you put it down and if you can walk away from it and you don't feel that missing, and you're not saying, wait a minute, that's part of who I am, then maybe you aren't witch. Maybe this isn't something you're meant to do. But if you have that you're missing it, you feel like some part of you is gone, and you are drawn back to it, maybe you want to look into that more. And that's clearly where you were at, Eli. Clearly that's where you were at. That was part of who you were. So I'm glad you found it again.
Indeed.
I'm glad you found it. I will put all the information where, if you're watching this, you want to look for Eli and you want to know where more stuff you can hear from him, more information. I'll make sure I include all his links in the information section of the video. And I want to thank you for joining us. Eli, thank you for talking with me.
Yeah, of course, you're welcome. Like I said, this was a big topic in my heart, so I felt like, of course, I gotta jump to this.
Great. I'm glad you did. And thank you all for watching the interview, and look for more, because there's more in this series. Until next time, I love you. Mwah. Blessed be everyone.